Nat Turner was born into the brutal reality of slavery, a system that defined his existence from the very beginning. He entered this world in Southampton County, Virginia in 1800, a time and place deeply entrenched in the institution of slavery. It was a rural world, seemingly idyllic on the surface, but its prosperity was entirely built on the backs of enslaved people, their forced labor fueling the southern economy. From his earliest days, even as a child, Turner stood out from those around him. There was something different about him, a spark of intellect that set him apart. He was unusually intelligent, and defying the oppressive restrictions placed upon enslaved people, he, against all odds, learned to read and write, opening up a world of knowledge that was meant to be forbidden to him. His family and the close-knit community surrounding him recognized something special in him, believing he was destined for a higher purpose, a calling that transcended the limitations of his enslaved status. They saw him as someone touched by grace, perhaps chosen by God to fulfill a significant role. Life for enslaved people was an unrelenting cycle of hardship and suffering. It was brutal. It meant enduring long days of back-breaking forced labor under the scorching sun, their bodies pushed to the limits of exhaustion. It meant living with the constant fear of families torn apart through sale and separation, a cruel practice that shattered the bonds of kinship. And it meant existing under the constant threat of violence, the ever-present whip, a symbol of the power wielded by slave owners and overseers. In this environment of despair, Turner's faith became his anchor, a source of strength and solace in a world that offered little comfort. He immersed himself in the teachings of the Bible, finding meaning and purpose within its sacred pages. He began to interpret the suffering around him, the injustice and cruelty of slavery, as a profound sin against God, a violation of divine law. As his understanding deepened, he came to believe he was chosen to lead his people to freedom, much like Moses led the Israelites out of Egyptian bondage. As he grew into adulthood, Turner became a preacher, sharing his interpretations of the scriptures with others. He quickly became known for his charisma and spiritual authority, captivating his listeners with his powerful sermons and unwavering conviction. He traveled between plantations, moving under the watchful eyes of the slave owners. He was spreading hope and quietly forging connections among the enslaved population, building a network of shared faith and a yearning for something more. His reputation as the prophet began to grow, a testament to his perceived spiritual gifts. This reputation gave him influence that extended beyond the direct control of slave owners, allowing him to reach into the hearts and minds of those they sought to control. Turner's unique position as a traveling preacher allowed him to witness firsthand the widespread pain, the daily indignities, and the deep, almost unbearable yearning for liberation that permeated the enslaved community. He became a symbol of hope and resistance, inspiring those around him with his unwavering belief in a better future. The seeds of rebellion were quietly taking root, nurtured by faith, suffering, and a burning desire for freedom, all within his heart and mind. Turner's profound faith and undeniable leadership skills would soon transform him from a respected preacher into a revolutionary figure, a leader of a desperate uprising. The world he was born into, the world of slavery, had undeniably shaped him, molding him into the man he was becoming. But he was about to reshape that world in return, leaving an indelible mark on history. The stage was set for a dramatic and violent confrontation, a clash between unwavering faith, brutal oppression, and the desperate, unyielding longing for freedom that burned in the hearts of the enslaved. In the 1820s, Nat Turner began experiencing visions, bloody corn, strange symbols, and battles between black and white spirits. He saw these as divine messages, warnings of a coming conflict. The solar eclipse of February 1831 became the final sign. Turner believed God was commanding him to act. He shared his visions with a trusted circle, men like Hark, Henry, Nelson, and Sam, who became his co-conspirators. They met in secret, planning a rebellion that would strike terror and inspire others to rise. The social climate was tense, debates over slavery raged, and news of revolts like Haiti's offered hope. Turner's group decided on a strategy of overwhelming force, aiming to dismantle slavery in Southampton County. Their meetings in the woods were filled with urgency and fear, but also a sense of destiny. The rebellion was no longer a distant dream. It was a plan, waiting for the right moment. Turner's visions had become a call to arms. The rebellion was initially planned for July 4, 1831, Independence Day. It was a symbolic choice, a direct challenge to the very notion of freedom celebrated by the nation while so many remained enslaved. But fate intervened. Illness delayed Turner, forcing a postponement of their audacious plan. The group remained deliberately small and intensely secretive. They understood that discovery would not only mean imprisonment, but certain and brutal death for all involved. Every whispered word, every clandestine meeting, was fraught with peril. Then, on August 13th, an extraordinary event occurred. A strange bluish sun cast an eerie light across the landscape. For Turner, a deeply spiritual man, this was no mere atmospheric phenomenon. It was a sign, a divine command that the time had finally come. He immediately gathered his most trusted followers, those who had shared his vision and endured the long wait. He declared that their moment had arrived, that the signs were undeniable, and that God was on their side. Their plan, born of desperation and righteous fury, was simple in its conception, yet utterly ruthless in its execution. They would move swiftly from plantation to plantation, systematically killing the white inhabitants. The aim was to spread terror, to prevent any alarms from being raised, and ultimately to spark a mass uprising of enslaved people throughout the region. Turner fervently believed that only such extreme terror could shatter the seemingly unbreakable grip of the slave system. He saw it as a necessary evil, a painful but essential step towards liberation. On August 21st, under the cloak of secrecy, the rebels convened in the depths of the woods. They shared a final, somber meal together, a moment of camaraderie and reflection before the storm. They were steeling themselves both physically and mentally for the unimaginable violence that lay ahead. Armed with axes, the primary tool of their enslavement, hatchets, and whatever swords they could acquire, they moved out, under the protective cover of darkness, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and grim determination. Their first target, carefully chosen, was the home of Joseph Travis, Turner's master, the man who held legal ownership over his body and soul. The rebellion, long simmering beneath the surface of oppression, was now about to explode into violent action. This was not merely an act of escape, a desperate attempt to flee to freedom. This was a declaration of war, a direct assault on the institution of slavery itself. Turner's unwavering faith, his charismatic leadership, and his burning desire for justice had brought them to this perilous brink. The night was thick with an almost palpable sense of fear, but also with a fragile, flickering hope, and the intoxicating promise of a revolutionary transformation. Southampton County, a seemingly peaceful corner of rural Virginia, was about to be plunged into a maelstrom of violence and terror, and would never ever be the same again. Before dawn on August 22, 1831, Turner and his rebels struck the Travis household, killing everyone inside. Their resolve hardened. They moved from plantation to plantation, freeing enslaved people and swelling their ranks. At each stop they used surprise and overwhelming violence, arming themselves with weapons taken from the dead. Turner's force grew to nearly 70, riding through the countryside with a single goal: reach Jerusalem, the county seat. Capturing the armory there would arm the rebellion and send a powerful message. For 2 days panic gripped Southampton County as the rebels advanced, families fleeing and militias scrambling to respond. The uprising seemed unstoppable, the balance of power suddenly reversed. Turner's vision of a mass revolt appeared within reach, but time was running out. The authorities were mobilizing. The fate of the rebellion would be decided in the coming hours. The South was waking to a nightmare it had long feared. As the rebellion spread, Turner's force grew. Some joined willingly, others out of fear. Turner led as a prophet and strategist, rarely killing after the first attack. The violence was calculated. Around 60 white people were killed, including women and children. The goal was terror to prevent resistance and spark a wider revolt, but the brutality also guaranteed a savage response. Near Jerusalem, the rebels met a well-armed militia. Outgunned and outnumbered, Turner's army was scattered in a brief, decisive battle. The dream of capturing the armory and igniting a larger uprising was crushed. Turner escaped into the swamps, becoming a fugitive as the rebellion collapsed. For over 2 months he evaded capture, while the countryside descended into chaos and retribution. The organized rebellion was over, but its shockwaves were just beginning. The white response was swift, brutal, and merciless. Fear gripped the white population, and they reacted with a vengeance, determined to quell any further unrest. Militias and enraged mobs swept through Southampton County and the surrounding areas, fueled by a desire for retribution and a deep-seated fear of further slave uprisings. In their wake, they killed up to 200 black people, most of whom were completely uninvolved in Nat Turner's rebellion. This indiscriminate violence underscored the racial terror of the time. Official trials followed, but justice was merely a formality, a thin veneer over the raw desire for revenge. Over 50 individuals were swiftly tried, convicted, and executed. Their bodies were then displayed publicly as stark warnings to the enslaved population, a grim testament to the consequences of rebellion. Adding insult to injury, the state government compensated slave owners for the loss of their property, a chilling and calculated reminder of the dehumanizing nature of the slave system and its prioritization of economic interests over human lives. Meanwhile, Nat Turner himself hid for weeks, evading capture in the dense forests and swamps of Virginia. His continued freedom fueled white paranoia and ignited rumors of further, even larger uprisings being planned in secret. But when he was finally captured, he surrendered quietly, offering no resistance. While imprisoned, Turner recounted his story in detail to lawyer Thomas Gray, who documented the confession. He spoke at length, explaining his visions, his interpretation of scripture, and his unwavering belief in his divine mission. He expressed no remorse for his actions, remaining steadfastly convinced that he was fulfilling God's will, regardless of the earthly consequences. On November 11, 1831, Nat Turner was hanged in Jerusalem, Virginia. His body was then desecrated, a brutal attempt by the authorities to erase his legacy and discourage any future acts of rebellion. The rebellion itself was definitively crushed, but the profound fear and simmering anger it unleashed would irrevocably reshape the social and political landscape of the South. Turner's confessions, as recorded by Gray, quickly became infamous and widely circulated, his name forever etched in the annals of history as a complex symbol of both terror and unwavering resistance. The violent aftermath of Nat Turner's rebellion marked a significant turning point, casting a long shadow over the history of American slavery and the nation as a whole. In the wake of the rebellion, Virginia's leaders faced a stark choice. For the first time, the General Assembly debated ending slavery, driven by fear of another uprising. Some argued for gradual emancipation and colonization, hoping to avert future bloodshed. Others, especially powerful slaveholders, defended slavery as a positive good and essential to their way of life. They dismissed the rebellion as the work of a fanatic, not a sign of deeper unrest. In the end, the pro-slavery faction prevailed. Emancipation proposals were narrowly defeated, and Virginia and the South chose to double down on slavery. The debates of 1832 would be the last serious discussion of ending slavery in the South before the Civil War. The door to peaceful change slammed shut. The consequences would be profound, setting the stage for a much larger conflict. Nat Turner's rebellion had forced the South to confront its own fears and choose repression over reform. After the rebellion, Southern states responded with harsh new slave codes. Education for black people was banned. Turner's literacy had made him dangerous. Black religious gatherings were restricted. No more black preachers or unsupervised worship. Free black people faced new limits on movement, property, and rights. The laws blurred the line between free and enslaved, tightening white control. The independent black church was forced underground, and hope for change dimmed. The South became more rigid and fearful, determined to prevent another uprising at any cost. Nat Turner's rebellion had made the chains of slavery even heavier. Nat Turner's rebellion was a seismic event in American history. It shattered the myth of contented slaves and exposed the violence at slavery's core. In the South, it ended debate over emancipation and led to harsher repression. In the North, it galvanized abolitionists, fueling calls for immediate freedom. Turner became a symbol, villain to some, martyr to others. His story is a reminder that oppression breeds resistance, and that violence was woven into the fabric of American slavery. The rebellion polarized the nation, making civil war more likely. Virginia's refusal to end slavery in 1832 closed the door on peaceful change. Turner's desperate bid for freedom foreshadowed the much larger conflict to come. His legacy endures, a tragic, powerful testament to the cost of bondage and the unbreakable human desire for liberty.